All right, welcome to, what day is it? Thursday? Welcome to Thursday. Anyways, this is after you guys have taken your vocabulary quiz. We only have a couple of note sets left for Rome 1, so you need to make sure that you start studying up on the things. Remember, tomorrow, Friday, you don't have to come into Zoom, but you do have to check in the classroom so that you guys get your points for that. That's pretty important since some of you guys need some points on a daily basis that you guys can get. So anyways, after Carthage has been defeated and has been cast off to the side and buried in salt, it is time for Rome to become an empire, as the thing here says today, road to an empire. Now let me get all the stuff out of the way because people said before, it's all my way and stuff. So here we go. All right, there's the ringy-dingy bell. All right, so road to an empire. So that's where we're getting to at this point. And the empire part is pretty important because, well, that's what it's going to become. And the road, as we said, all roads lead to Rome. So at this point, here's where it's going to go. So it says at the death of Caesar here in orange. This is how far it's going to expand. So spoiler alert, Julius Caesar's going to do a great job. Then Augustus is the green, so he's going to add some of these caps here. And then in the red, that is of Marcus Aurelius. Yes, you got to roll your tongue when you say that, in 180 AD. So within these three pretty good emperors, the Empire of Rome is going to expand quite well. So let me move this again. It's in the way. All right, so here we go. So first thing I'm going to have you do is I want you to take a break. Click on the John Green video link that is here. Actually, you have to do it in your classroom. Don't try and do it on the slideshow because and then watch between 240 and 640. And that should give you a little bit of an idea on Julius Caesar. So that's for 250 to 640. And watch that. And then come back here. And now we're back. All right, so I know some of you probably didn't watch that anyways, but you should because I like John Green videos and he tells you a lot about Julius Caesar. So Julius Caesar. In 16 BC, Rome was ruled by what's called a triumvirate. Now it's different from tripartite. Tripartite means three-part government. Triumvirate means that it is ruled by three people. Hopefully not those three goofballs right there. That would not be a very good triumvirate. So your first triumvirate is called or named, the first triumvirate has guys named Crassus, Pompey, that's not Pompey, that's a different thing, and Julius Caesar. Now, yes, we all know Julius Caesar among the three. So triumvirates, not a bad idea on how to rule things. I mean, you've got three people. You could separate things pretty fairly. Everybody could be put in charge of something, I suppose, and you could have a check and balance. You know, you could say that one group's in charge of the executive, legislative, judicial, and that thing will all work out. But we know human nature, it doesn't always work out. Even when there's a rule by two, that can always be bad. That can't always be good, I guess. I mean, there's some points where it might work. Like we said, Sparta had a village chief and a war chief. But in this case, it's clearly going to go bad because ego is going to ride out over these three. And so each of these guys control their own army around the republic. So that's a big problem too, because, you know, you've got each guy has their own army, and you would suppose that each army would be loyal to their own guy. So again, that's the problem is you've got power split three ways, not really shared three ways, but split three ways. And again, ego is going to come in, so that's going to be a problem. So Julius Caesar, a guy that we're going to talk about, fought in a place called Gaul. And he became popular with the lower classes. Now, Gaul is France. It's what we consider France today, especially like the, I want to say the southeastern part of it. But he's over there fighting in Gaul against the barbarian groups, and he becomes popular with the lower class people. And that's a key to like any election or any kind of form of leadership, that you want to adhere yourself to the group of people who are the majority. Because if you have a vote, these people can vote, then the majority should always win, right? So you should get yourself, again, adhered to or find a commonality between you and those types of people. So in this case, that's what he does, especially with the soldiers. The soldiers love Julius Caesar. He was a great leader. He was pretty good to the people that he conquered. So he had this following, a little bit of this cult of personality, if you know what that term means. But he had that with the lower class people, so they liked him. Now, the triumvirate goes down to 2 when Crassus is killed in 53 BC. So now your group of 2 gets knocked down in 7 years, or sorry, group of 3 gets knocked down to 2 in a span of 7 years when Crassus gets killed in battle. And then Senate, remember that's your legislative branch of the Romans, they call for Pompey to lead. So that means that basically Julius Caesar is left out in the cold. So once Pompey is told that he's going to be the ruler, he wants Julius Caesar to come back to Rome with his army, and he's told to give it up. Because if he doesn't give it up, then he chooses to start what's called a civil war. Now, when we say civil war, especially for U.S. history, we're used to it being American versus American, North versus the South, Union versus Confederate, Blue versus Gray, whatever you want to call it. So this is essentially the same thing for Rome, is that if he does not return home with his army and he gives it up willingly, then probably going to split the country or split the empire up, or what would be the empire. So that's his decision. Now, he's a smart guy. What would you assume would probably happen to Julius Caesar if he returns home? Well, his army, who's loyal to him, would end up getting taken over by Pompey, and Julius Caesar probably would be either executed or else jailed, because there's no way that this guy's just going to be able to stick around if Pompey is going to be in control. So chances are showing he probably would have been assassinated in some fashion, mysteriously dies or whatever, befalls the fate of Hannibal and gets poisoned too. So this is going to be important because Julius Caesar refuses. If it would be a totally different story, no the name Julius Caesar in your household, if he just gave it up and then he was done, he'd be gone to history. But he refuses. And instead, he marches his 5,000 men that he had into Italy by crossing the Rubicon River. Now, this is relevant because this is, you see, somebody got my money on PayPal. This is relevant because he's now basically committing treason by going against his own country. But he thinks he's doing it for the betterment of his people. He thinks he's a better ruler. He's got his army behind him. I mean, if it was just him crossing across the Rubicon, big deal, nobody would care. But he marched an army across the Rubicon, and that's where we get this saying here today about crossing the Rubicon. So Pompey tries to stop Caesar, and I'll get to the Rubicon thing in a second, but it's defeated in Greece in 48 BC. So by crossing that Rubicon, the important thing, I like this picture of Julius Caesar. He's looking down from on high. He's pondering whether or not he should cross the Rubicon River or not. Because if he does, he's committing treason against his own country. He's likely starting a civil war, which he did. And so crossing the Rubicon today, when you use it in your own vernacular, simply means a decision that you cannot take back. So it might be a big important thing in your life that you know, darned if you do, darned if you don't. You got to make this big decision, and then you can't take it back. It's kind of like the old saying of you can't shoot two days back in the tube once it's already let out. So that's what he's pondering here. Do I cross the river? Do I commit treason? Am I doing it for the betterment of Rome? So he says yes. So he ends up defeating Pompey in Greece, which of course is a little bit over the way from where Rome or Italy is. And so at this point, that triumvirate falls to one, and that goes to Julius Caesar. So Caesar, again, military background, liked by his people. He declares himself permanent dictator. Now remember, dictator is a little bit different in Roman time periods with Cincinnatus. Cincinnatus was the temporary dictator. He only took it in the time of war, and then when he's done, he gave it back. Now, in this case, it's the word permanent. Permanent means what? Permanent means lasting or forever. So that's the big change. Now, obviously, Rome isn't going to like this too much, especially the Senate, because how dare he come in and do this? Well, first of all, they didn't like him anyway, so who's he trying to appease? Secondly, he's got that power behind him. He's got his army, who he is beloved to, and as well as the lower class people. So I think that's to his advantage to call himself permanent dictator. And then he gets rid of those people that didn't really like him so much in Senate. He fills them with loyal allies and his friends. So this can be a positive, this can be a negative. The positive is obviously you've got a bunch of yes men that are working for you in Senate, but at the same time, yes men aren't always great because they always tell you what you want to hear rather than what you need to hear. There is a difference. So, it's always nice to have those friends who always have your back and such, but it's even better to have those friends who will straighten you out every so often when you need it. So this may end up coming back to haunt him. But as soon as he takes leadership, as he becomes dictator, he has some what's called reforms. Now reforms, anytime I think of reform, I think of Humpty Dumpty. That all the king's horses and all the king's men tried to put him together again. They tried to reform him, which means that something was broken. So what we'll look at with each of these dictators is something they try to fix within Rome, especially in terms of society and politics. It doesn't mean that it always works, but a lot of times it is for the better. So the first thing he does is he granted citizenship to the Roman territories. Now this is really good because for those people that he defeated and conquered, in groups that aren't quite in the auspices of the Roman Empire, he gives them citizenship. So again, this is an act of kindness, which might help him later on. He starts a new colony to give land to the landless. Makes sense. Again, you're appeasing whom? The lower class people. The people who have a need, they would like land, they don't have any. So he says, okay, let's give land to these people. Again, they are adhering themselves to him. He also creates work for the poor. All of these things are good in terms of society, especially when it comes to taxation. How can a poor person pay tax if they don't work? So the government creates jobs for them that they can take, and then they can work. They can pay taxes, they can buy things, they can be an active member of society. So really everybody wins in the long run here. And he orders slave owners to hire free workers, not to use slaves. So they say, well, why is that important? Well, keep in mind, if you use slaves all the time, and you've got all these people who need jobs who are citizens, well, they're not going to get those jobs. And at the same time, think of how slaves would be. Slaves don't want to work for people. They don't want to be slaves in the first place. So they're going to be angry towards those people. So you can kind of kill two birds with one stone here and get rid of slavery, which is going to be a problem for Rome later on because they have too many slaves, and to hire your free workers. So you look at all these things and you say, who benefits the most? Well, the middle to lower class people benefit the most. Who does not benefit? The upper class people. So those are the ones who are going to be upset with Julius Caesar that he's doing all of these good things for those people who are lower to middle class, but not necessarily for themselves. He also, now take a grain of salt with this, it says he created a 12-month, 365-day calendar with a leap year. That's called the Julian calendar. But it's not what we use today. Today we use the Gregorian calendar, but this is actually based on the Julian calendar. And that explains why your months have a Roman tendency to them, in case you did not know that. Like July and August, emperors, if you know who those would be. So he didn't create it himself, but this was under his, again, auspices is when he was an emperor or when he was the leader. So again, we use the Gregorian calendar, which is based on it. It's used in the US and most of the world. So that takes place in 1582. So for a long period of time, that Julian calendar is what people used. And then we said 1582, we use what's called the Gregorian, and that's XIII. Anybody know? That's 13th, Gregory the 13th. We use that calendar instead, which I believe added a few more days and kind of arranged the months a little better, as far as I know. But anyways, that's the one that we used. So moving on, there it says something about the Gregorian calendar if you want to read up on it. Maybe not so much. But anyways, so the Emperor Julius Caesar. So when we look at Caesar, we think of him in terms of history of a couple good things. Number one, strong military leader. Number two, he made some really good reforms that helped Rome out. The problem is he also had his enemies. So Julius Caesar's story also has a bad ending to it. If you know the saying, beware the Ides of March, and you look back behind him, it's not his shadow, it's not his cape, it's people coming up to stab him. Well, spoiler alert, that is what happens with Julius Caesar. So the people believed him to be a strong leader, and he brought peace and order to Rome, for the most part. People really liked him. Now, he was a strong leader. He was a bit of a hothead at times, very temperamental, certainly uses power as a dictator, as he should have, I guess. I don't think that he was overtly oppressive to the people, but he helped to get things in order in terms of society. There was a story, I just recall that Julius Caesar was said to be kidnapped or was taken in, and I have to remember the rest of the story, but that he was kidnapped or was going to be taken, and they offered a bounty on him or wanted paid to have his return and a ransom. That's the word I'm looking for. And Caesar was mad that they asked too little for his ransom. I guess that tells you how big his ego was. They should ask a little bit more for him instead of a lot more instead of what they actually were going to ask. But anyways, here's the problem with Caesar. He didn't appease his enemies. His enemies were actually his friends that he had put in Senate, that they got turned around a little bit in their thinking and thought that because he declared himself permanent dictator, that he would end up wanting to be king. You say, well, what's the difference? Well, the difference would be is that he would absolve or get rid of Senate. And his friends clearly did not want that. And so their thought was, let's get rid of Julius Caesar. And so they did. He had two main friends named Brutus and Cassius who plotted to kill him, but it wasn't just those two. Those are the two that get the notoriety. But instead, it was a whole mass of people who actually went through with the whole process of killing Julius Caesar. Now, this is a famous photo of Julius Caesar, but this was a play back in the 1800s, I believe early 1860s, when photography first came in, of the Shakespearean play of Julius Caesar. And the actors here you would not know, except for one of the main guys who played Julius Caesar was a guy named Booth. Now, have you ever heard of the name Booth in terms of history? So you're saying, John Wilkes Booth, who killed Abraham Lincoln. This is actually John Wilkes Booth's father, who was playing Julius Caesar in the play Julius Caesar. He gets assassinated himself. The irony is, John Wilkes Booth assassinates Abraham Lincoln in 1865. So what happens to Julius Caesar? Well, he is told to beware the Ides of March by a fortune teller / soothsayer. And the Ides of March is going to be March 15th coming up here. And so he's told to beware it. He's like, I don't care about it. Now, I did Google the Ides of March, and this is what I found. I found this band online. Based on the haircuts and this grumpy guy over here, I would avoid them too. But unfortunately for Julius Caesar, he was killed March 15th, 44 BC. For all of his trouble, he was killed on the Senate floor. Believe it or not. He's called into the Senate meeting. He is surrounded. He is stabbed to death. Now, of all the times that he was stabbed, which I have to look see, I'm going to say 24. I think they said that only 2 were actually fatal. One that I believe severed an artery near his heart, but the rest of them were not. So it tells you some of those guys were just, not too much into it. But in the end, he ends up getting stabbed in the back by his friends. That's kind of where you get that saying is be careful of your friends as they might stab you in the back. Hopefully not. So this is the end of Julius Caesar. But you know what? He did a great job in getting Rome set up for future emperors, including his nephew, Octavian / Augustus, who we'll get to here in a little bit. So what does this mean for Rome? Should future rulers be cautious? Well, it means for Rome they're going to need new dictators. They're going to need a new leader. And should future rulers be cautious? Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we're going to have the creation of something called the Praetorian Guard soon enough in one of your notes. So here you go. Here's a did you know for your end. Did you know the Caesar family has 2 months named after them? July for Julius Caesar and August for Augustus Caesar, who we'll talk about in your next note set. So there you go. There's Julius Caesar. Hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, make sure you show up tomorrow, at least to do your triumvirate activity. But anyways, that's it. See you later.